Marcia felt a tingling at the back of her neck the moment she climbed out of her sedan in the parking lot of Pinecrest Meadows. It was late Saturday afternoon, and the summer sun hung thick in the air. From her vantage point, she could see the aquamarine shimmer of the community pool behind a waist-high, wrought iron fence. Or perhaps shimmer was too optimistic a word. Something about the pool seemed off. The water looked strangely pale, almost chalky under the bright light. And even though she was still about 30 yards away, her nose twitched at a sharp, chemical scent that made her eyes water. Marcia was no stranger to strong chlorine odors. She'd grown up swimming competitively. She'd recognized many a time when someone had overdone it with pool chemicals. But this odor felt more insidious, more pungent, as though it were itching to travel deeper into her lungs than it should. She looked at a group of neighbors milling by the clubhouse doors, whispering among themselves in hushed, anxious tones. Everyone seemed hesitant to get too close to the water. She approached the group, noticing that George, the HOA president, was absent. Usually, he hovered at every event, greeting members and boasting about the new lounge chairs or the fresh landscaping. But tonight, as families prepared for the monthly Summer Saturday social, he was nowhere to be found. "Hey," Marcia said softly to Louise, an older woman she recognized from the next street over. "Where's George? He usually runs these things." Louise shrugged, holding a half-finished paper cup of lemonade. "No clue. Heard he was messing with the pool maintenance earlier. But now he's holed up in his office." Her voice trembled, suggesting more than just idle chit-chat. Louise was a retired nurse who typically exuded confidence in the face of anything medical or dangerous. For her to look this nervous made Marcia's stomach turn. Louise then nodded toward the water, where two teenage boys, probably children of one of the new families, were splashing near the shallow end. They seemed unaware of the stench, or were ignoring it in pursuit of carefree summer fun. Marcia squinted. The older boy's eyes were rimmed with redness, and he kept rubbing them. It was a classic sign of high chlorination, but these kids just kept at it, dunking each other and shrieking with laughter. She frowned, that uneasy feeling crawling along her spine again. "Has anyone tested the water?" Marcia asked, turning back to Louise. A short woman with curly gray hair, Doreen, the volunteer pool coordinator, spoke up, her voice tense. "I tried, but the test kits are locked in the maintenance room. George has the key. I called him, and he said something about adjusting chemical levels earlier, but he swore to be fine by the time the party started." Louise glanced around, then put a hand to her chest. "But it's not fine. My sinuses are burning just standing here." Marcia nodded. "Let's get those kids out." They started walking toward the fence, but were interrupted by a sudden burst of rowdy cheers near the deep end. A small crowd of younger adults was floating on rafts, raising plastic cups in a toast. They didn't seem bothered by the smell. Maybe the reek wasn't as strong if you were already in the water. Just then, the sky clouded over for a moment, as though preparing for an unexpected summer shower. An odd hush fell over the courtyard, except for the distant hum of cicadas. Marcia could feel the atmosphere constrict, thick with tension. She opened the gate, and the smell hit her full force, a stinging, acrid wave that made her cough. Now up close, she noticed something else, a faint, swirling haze just above the water's surface, as though the chlorine was vaporizing into a low-hanging mist. "Everybody out," she called, waving frantically. "Get out of the pool." One of the teenagers paused, looked at Marcia with confusion, then turned to his younger brother. They both laughed, thinking it was some grown-up overreaction. But Louise stepped forward and, with her best nurse's authority, practically barked at them to get to the ladder. Their expressions sobered, and they began wading to the edge. A few of the other swimmers took notice and began drifting over too. Someone from behind cried out, "What's going on?" Marcia spun around to see a middle-aged man in a Hawaiian shirt, holding a foam plate of nachos. He wore the community's neon wristband for the event. His eyes flickered with annoyance, as if this were a personal affront to his fun. Marcia was about to explain when the older teen scrambled onto the deck, coughing violently. The younger boy was right behind him, tears streaming down his face from aggravated eyes. Then the younger boy collapsed to his knees, gasping. At that moment, every idle conversation ground to a halt. Phones came out, calls to 911 started. Panic, like a chain reaction, spread around the pool deck. Some folks scrambled to help. Others backed away, unsure of what to do. The thick chemical odor seemed to grow stronger with every passing second. Doreen ran toward the maintenance room, presumably to find George or break in for the test kits. Louise dropped beside the teenager, feeling for a pulse while barking instructions to the father. Marcia hovered, helpless for a beat, until she snapped into action. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Over the roar of her own blood pumping in her ears, Marcia heard Louise's shaky voice say, "He's breathing, but it's shallow." The father was half sobbing now, confusion contorting his face. "We were just here to have fun. What's happening?" In the middle of the chaos, the gate to the clubhouse banged open. George finally emerged, short of breath and drenched in sweat, his white collared shirt stained. He skidded to a stop near the group, eyes darting from the coughing children to the swirling haze over the water. Marcia locked eyes with him, furious. "What did you do?" George didn't answer. Another wave of that pungent smell wafted over them. She could feel it burning her throat, as though each molecule was a lit match. Everyone was coughing, tearing up. The teenage boy let out a final, rattled breath, and then went limp. Louise's scream tore through the humid air. A hush followed that was almost louder than the scream itself. In that single, chilling moment, the neighborhood felt like it had fallen into a nightmare from which it might never fully wake. Marcia's fingers trembled as she ended the call with the emergency dispatcher. Adrenaline sizzled in her veins, making everything appear sharper and more surreal. She could see the sheen of sweat on George's forehead, the worry etched across Louise's face, the alarm in the wide eyes of neighbors who stood rooted at a distance. "What exactly happened here, George?" Marcia demanded, her voice sharper than she'd ever heard it. "Where did the chlorine get so high?" George's mouth opened, but no words came out. He shifted from foot to foot, shoulders slumped like a man already cornered by guilt. "I was just making sure we had enough chlorine for the big summer social," he mumbled, eyes flicking away. "Maybe misread the instructions on the new system. The auto dispensers were supposed to handle it, but I thought I'd top it off." Louise cut him off with a glare as lethal as the fumes. "Top it off? Are you out of your mind? You can't just top off with a random measure of pool chemicals. There's a precise formula." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. I know. I was just worried about algae blooms. Remember that fiasco last year? People threatened to sue the HOA because the water turned green, and Marcia's cheeks burned with anger. "So you tossed in more chemicals than recommended, locked the maintenance room, and just walked away? Didn't even test it again?" George swiped his hand across his damp brow. "It was supposed to be fine after a few hours of circulation. I swear I didn't think it'd be this bad." "People are collapsing," Louise snapped. "You realize this is a medical emergency, right?" A siren cut through the stifling air, drawing everyone's attention. Two paramedics hurried in, lugging equipment and wearing masks. They found a teenage boy lying limp at Louise's side. Another adult was crouched over a second swimmer who had staggered out of the pool and collapsed onto the concrete. The paramedics immediately administered oxygen, their faces grim. More sirens echoed, promising additional backup. One paramedic looked at the swirling haze, then at the large crowd. "Everyone away from the pool deck," she ordered. "We need you at least 50 feet back. Chlorine gas is heavier than air. It's pooling over the water. You're all at risk." Neighbors scrambled, ushering one another away. Marcia found herself gripping Louise's arm, guiding her toward the grassy stretch near the clubhouse. The paramedics began triaging the ones who'd shown the most severe symptoms. The entire scene felt like something out of a disaster drill, except it was real, frighteningly real. George stood off to the side, face ashen. Even from that distance, Marcia could sense his panic morphing into defensive resolve. HOA members parted around him, some glaring, others turning away. A few muttered about legal repercussions, personal injury suits, or even criminal charges. A second ambulance arrived. This time, a hazmat team came out, their suits looking cumbersome in the humid summer air. They positioned a series of fans around the pool, trying to disperse the fumes. Meanwhile, a police cruiser pulled up and a tall officer climbed out, adjusting his belt as he scanned the chaotic scene. He strode over to George, presumably to get an initial statement. George's gaze darted around as he explained, his hands trembling with every gesture. Marcia watched paramedics working on the teenage boy, who still hadn't regained consciousness. Each breath from the oxygen mask looked labored. At one point, a paramedic shook his head grimly, and the sight sent a jolt of dread through her. That child might never wake up, or if he did, the cost of his health could be monumental. Tears welled in Louise's eyes. I recognized him earlier. He just moved here with his family. Maybe 2 weeks ago, she whispered. Name's Kevin, I think. A bright kid. This is just so unfair. Marcia pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting the urge to break down. Instead, she turned her attention to the swirl of activity among the officials. That's when she noticed Doreen standing near the fence, refusing to step away. She was shouting something at the hazmat workers, jabbing her finger at the pool's filtration system. Doreen had spent countless volunteer hours there. She probably knew the layout better than anyone. Marcia rushed over to her. Doreen, what's going on? Doreen's eyes blazed. They can't find a main cutoff switch for the new dispensing system. George had some local handyman install it last month, and now the labeling is all messed up. The chemical feed might still be pumping chlorine into the water. The hazmat worker overheard, nodded curtly, and ducked into the maintenance room, presumably to find the elusive switch. Doreen let out a shaky exhale, tears brimming in her eyes. One small oversight after another, and look where it's gotten us. Marcia placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. We'll get shut off. The paramedics are doing everything they can for the victims. She glanced back at the patch of grass where the injured swimmers lay receiving treatment. More neighbors arrived, some pushing through the growing crowd of onlookers. Several older folks who had planned to watch the social from lawn chairs were being escorted away by police, coughing into damp towels. Others shouted into their phones, frantically calling family members to warn them away from the premises. In the distance, a local news van pulled up. A young reporter hopped out, her expression turning from mild curiosity to horror once she caught a whiff of the chemicals. She began speaking into a microphone, gesturing toward the pool, while a cameraman filmed the scene over the fence. Word was spreading fast. Doreen rubbed her forehead. It's not just about health, you know. Our little community is going to be on the evening news for all the wrong reasons. Lawsuits, investigations. The board will be in shambles. And poor Kevin. If he survives, his family could sue. Who'd blame them? Marcia let out a weary breath, her heart thrumming. We have to focus on saving lives first, she said, though the specter of legal battles and uprooted friendships loomed in her mind. The confusion, the swirling blame, George's dreadful decision-making. All of it was weaving a tragedy that might haunt Pinecrest Meadows for years. Louise joined them, her lips pressed tight. EMTs took Kevin away in the ambulance. He still wasn't conscious. Another adult, too, an older man. They're rushing them to the nearest hospital. I overheard them say it's severe chemical inhalation. Marcia swallowed hard. We'll have to wait for updates and hope for the best. Doreen nodded, anguish etched into every line of her face. This is beyond anything I've ever seen. She inhaled shakily. I just never thought I'd witness something so deadly in what's supposed to be a safe, friendly neighborhood. No one had a comforting response to that. They stood there in the fading evening light, the sound of industrial fans whirring, the haze gradually lifting but leaving behind a bitter reminder of the accident. And in their collective silence, the reality sank in. One person was fighting for his life, and nobody knew if the worst was yet to come. Early the next morning, Marcia woke to a pulsing headache. She was sure it was partly due to the lingering chemical irritants, but also from the emotional drain of the previous night. She checked her phone immediately, scanning for updates in the neighborhood group chat. A new post from Louise read, Kevin is still in a coma. The older man, Mr. Hollis, stable but sedated. Keep them in your prayers. A heaviness settled over her. She thought of Kevin's mother, whom she'd only briefly met. What a nightmare to move into a new place, only to have your child's life threatened by what should have been a routine pool gathering. She made coffee, sipped it slowly, and tried to gather her thoughts. The fiasco was all over the local news. Reporters had pounced on the story. Community pool over-chlorination accident leaves 2 hospitalized in critical condition. The headlines read. It would cast a dark cloud over the reputation of Pinecrest Meadows. She remembered how, when she'd first moved here, the glossy brochures showed a pristine pool, neighbors laughing at cookouts, and kids riding bikes on quiet, tree-lined streets. The promise of a tight-knit community had convinced her to buy, even though the HOA fees were steep. Now the illusion was shattered. She reached for her laptop, deciding to check the official HOA website. Normally, it featured announcements about flower bed competitions and newsletter sign-ups. Today, it displayed a somber statement. We are aware of the incident at the community pool and are cooperating with local authorities in an ongoing investigation. Our thoughts and prayers go out to those affected. In bold letters. Pool and recreation area closed until further notice. Marcia let out a frustrated sigh. That's it, she thought. No apology. No acceptance of responsibility. Just a bland expression of concern. She scrolled for more, but found nothing substantial. She wondered if George had posted that, or if it had been one of the other board members. Either way, it felt like a feeble attempt to distance themselves from the tragedy. Her phone buzzed. It was Louise, sounding out of breath. Marcia, there's an emergency HOA meeting in an hour at the clubhouse. They're calling all residents. We need to be there. Things might get ugly. Marcia thanked her, threw on some clothes, and headed out. She found the parking lot already jammed. People gripped folded chairs or leaned against the clubhouse railings, talking in low, urgent voices. A hush fell as George and 2 other board members, Trish, the treasurer, and Mark, the secretary, took seats at a long folding table. Several legal pads and a pitcher of water were set out. All right, everyone, George began, clearing his throat. He looked haggard, like he'd aged overnight. We're here to address the serious chemical incident at the pool. I know emotions are high. We're all concerned about Kevin and Mr. Hollis. As soon as we have updates. Where's your apology? Someone shouted from the back. This is on your head, George. A rumble of agreement spread through the crowd. George held up a hand. I fully accept responsibility for my role in adjusting the chemicals, he said, voice quivering. I made an error, and we've opened an insurance claim. We're cooperating with the police and with the health department. Rest assured, we'll be transparent. Transparent? Louise interjected sharply. Like that statement on the HOA website, that was a bunch of legal posturing. You're just trying to avoid liability. Murmurs of discontent spread. Trish, the treasurer, leaned forward. We understand your anger, but we have to follow certain procedures. Our priority right now is ensuring the pool area is decontaminated and that those affected receive proper care. We also need to investigate how this oversight happened, so it never happens again. An elderly resident, Mr. Caldwell, raised a trembling hand. What if Kevin doesn't make it? Are we prepared for a lawsuit that could bankrupt the HOA? That means all our dues will skyrocket, or we lose amenities. Does everyone realize that? Fear and frustration rippled through the group. Marcia tried to remain calm. We can't let fear of lawsuits overshadow the real issue. A child is in a coma. An adult is severely injured. This shouldn't have happened in the first place. Agreed, said a voice behind her. She turned to see a tall woman with stern eyes, introducing herself as an inspector from the health department. I'm here to gather preliminary details. Our hazmat team has already tested the water. Chlorine levels were triple what's considered safe, possibly more, and we suspect additional chemicals were also added in excessive amounts, leading to noxious fumes. George's face turned an alarming shade of red. Triple? That's... The inspector pinned him with a cold stare. Yes, triple. Mr. Halverson, you stated you personally introduced extra chemicals. We'll need a detailed log of the amounts used and the exact times. And I understand you also blocked access to the test kits." George sputtered, glancing at Mark, who looked equally panicked. "I didn't lock them on purpose. The maintenance door automatically locks. I just didn't realize the test kits were inside. Or you didn't want anyone to see how much you'd put in," someone muttered from the front row. George stiffened. "That's not true. I was trying to fix the algae problem. I didn't want a repeat of last summer's fiasco." His voice trembled, tears welling in his eyes. I never meant for this to happen. Please believe me." Silence fell. Even the inspector's expression softened slightly, sensing the genuine remorse behind the confusion. But that didn't erase the fact that negligence had led to catastrophic harm. Trish cleared her throat. "At this point, the board is hiring a professional company to drain and refill the pool. We'll handle all costs associated with the cleanup. We're also providing any information needed to the families of those injured for their medical care. If there's anything else we can do." A woman raised her hand, voice trembling with anger. "What about therapy for the kids who saw their friend nearly die? What about the man who might have permanent lung damage?" Mark scribbled notes on a legal pad, nodding. "We'll discuss mental health resources." The meeting dragged on, a swirl of accusations, tears, and demands. George repeatedly wiped his face with a handkerchief, at times teetering on the edge of collapse. The inspector promised a thorough investigation. The potential for civil and even criminal charges loomed, casting a pall over the entire gathering. By the end, not much was truly resolved, except that the community was in crisis. As neighbors filtered out, pockets of conversation buzzed with mention of lawsuits, medical updates, and the possible dissolution of the current HOA leadership. Marcia left feeling heavier than ever, still tasting the acrid sting of chlorine on her tongue, still hearing echoes of the paramedics' siren in her mind. And she knew that Pinecrest Meadows, for all its manicured lawns and polite smiles, would never be the same. Days turned into a blur of phone calls, media inquiries, and sleepless nights. The entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath, awaiting news about Kevin. At least Mr. Hollis was improving. He'd regained consciousness after 2 days in the hospital, though doctors warned he might face ongoing respiratory complications. Marcia, feeling a sense of duty, joined a small group of neighbors who started a meal train for Kevin's family. They delivered casseroles, fresh fruit, and homemade soups to the hospital waiting room. Kevin's mother, a quiet woman named Teresa, accepted them with a haunted look in her eyes. She was often absent mentally, her thoughts clearly consumed by her son's fragile condition. "I appreciate what you're doing," Teresa murmured one afternoon, after Marcia handed her a container of chicken noodle soup. "But I just wish none of this had ever happened." She broke off, tears threatening to spill. Marcia placed a comforting hand on Teresa's shoulder. "He's strong, Teresa. The doctors are doing everything they can." Teresa nodded, pressing her lips together. "He's on a ventilator. They say it's helping him breathe," but she shook her head, too overwhelmed to continue. Marcia's chest tightened. She promised to organize more support, then quietly retreated. As she walked to her car, her phone buzzed. A text from Louise. "Louise, hey, the lawyer for the HOA wants statements from everyone who was there. Be careful what you say. They're collecting info for the official record." Marcia sighed. The last thing she wanted was to get tangled in legal tape, but ignoring it would only prolong the confusion. She typed back a quick acknowledgement and drove home through the winding streets of Pinecrest Meadows, passing the shuttered gate to the pool. A bright yellow hazard tape stretched across the entrance like a macabre warning sign. At home, she found a typed letter on her porch, a request for a statement from the HOA's legal counsel. She also saw a second letter, a formal notice from a law firm representing Kevin's family. A pang of guilt coursed through her. She wasn't personally responsible, but she felt complicit simply because she was part of the community. She wondered how many more families had received the same notice. Later that evening, a knock at the door startled her. It was Doreen, clutching a stack of papers. Her eyes were puffy, as if she'd been crying. She settled on Marcia's couch with a weary sigh. "I've been collecting old maintenance logs," Doreen explained. Turns out George had a pattern of messing with the pool chemicals without recording it properly. He let the automatic system do its job for weeks, then suddenly panic and dump an extra. I've got emails from the pool servicing company warning him not to tamper with their calibrated machines. Marcia's jaw clenched. Why didn't the board do anything about it? Doreen shrugged, voice trembling. He's the president. He said he was saving money, reducing service call fees. The rest of us were busy with other tasks and just trusted him. Now look where that got us. They spread the papers across Marcia's dining table. Maintenance logs, email printouts, scattered notes. It formed a mosaic of negligence. Doreen pointed to a particular entry, a warning from the professional pool tech. Over-chlorination can cause dangerous chemical imbalances, potential inhalation hazards. Please do not add separate chemicals without consulting us. George never forwarded this to the rest of the board, Doreen said. He brushed it aside. You can see his reply. Understood, I have a handle. Marcia stared at the words, seething. He's done. Doreen snorted a bitter laugh. If Kevin doesn't wake up, George might be facing more than just losing his HOA position. This could become a manslaughter case. That's if the prosecutors decide his negligence is criminal. They sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Finally, Marcia gathered the documents. We need to bring all this to the investigation team, the health department, the police, whoever needs it. I won't let this be swept under the rug. Doreen nodded, tears again threatening to fall. Thank you. Just thank you. The next morning, they handed the files to the health department inspector, who listened intently. After reviewing the evidence, she thanked them with a curt nod, promising it would be included in the official inquiry. Meanwhile, social media erupted with discussions. Neighbors alternated between fury at George and heartbreak for Kevin's family. Many older residents felt betrayed, having trusted George with the well-being of the community. A few, ironically, still defended him, claiming he was just trying to do what was best. Amid all this, a hush fell over Pinecrest Meadows the day Kevin's condition took a turn for the worse. Around midday, a rumor spread through the community chat. Kevin had suffered severe respiratory failure. By sunset, the rumor was confirmed with a stark message from Teresa posted on social media. Kevin passed away at 6:13 p.m. We cannot thank everyone enough for their prayers. Please remember him as a kind, bright boy. Marcia read that message 3 times, the words refusing to sink in. She felt nausea roll through her stomach. She'd never really known Kevin beyond that fleeting glimpse of him at the pool, but she couldn't stop picturing his face, wide-eyed and carefree, moments before the chemical fumes claimed him. The entire neighborhood reeled from the news. Porch lights across Pinecrest Meadows blinked off early that night, as if collectively mourning. The phone lines buzzed with hushed condolences or simmering rage. More than one resident proposed a candlelight vigil. Another demanded an emergency meeting to impeach George from the HOA presidency, citing moral grounds. The tragedy had reached its bleak conclusion, but the aftermath was only beginning. By early morning, black wreaths and homemade signs appeared on front doors and mailboxes. Some read, "Justice for Kevin." Others bore messages like, "No more negligence." Marcia watched from her window, tears blurring her vision. A small, impromptu vigil formed on the street corner, neighbors gathering in thick silence, lighting candles that flickered in the summer breeze. Louise passed by Marcia's door on her way to the vigil. She knocked softly, and Marcia joined her. They walked to the corner, arms linked. The crowd parted to let them through. A local pastor murmured a short prayer, asking for comfort for the grieving family, wisdom for the investigators, and unity for the community. The hush afterward was profound. Finally, Louise spoke, tears glistening on her cheeks. We owe it to Kevin and to ourselves to ensure this never happens again. Heads nodded, murmurs of agreement followed. Some placed flowers at the base of a makeshift memorial sign. Marcia looked around at the quiet throng of neighbors, retirees, young parents, single professionals, all standing together in heartbreak. The flickering candles reflected on tear-streaked faces, and the air smelled faintly of wax and sorrow. And in that silent circle, Marcia realized that Pinecrest Meadows was no longer just a cluster of houses with well-tended lawns. It had become a community shaped by loss. And perhaps, she thought with a fragile sense of hope, that shared grief could either tear them apart or bind them closer than ever. A month later, the weather changed from the sweltering heat of midsummer to the more tempered warmth of early autumn. Pinecrest Meadows bore subtle reminders of the tragedy. A corner of the park was renamed Kevin's Grove, and a small plaque was erected. Mr. Hollis had returned to his home, moving a bit more slowly, coughing a little more often, but grateful to be alive. The pool remained drained, its once inviting basin now an empty white shell stained with rust-brown patches from disuse. George, meanwhile, resigned from his position as HOA president under a storm of condemnation. The police investigation continued, as did the civil lawsuits. Rumors swirled about potential criminal charges. For now, he kept a low profile, staying inside his house or leaving the neighborhood altogether. Some people claimed they saw him loading up a U-Haul one early morning, perhaps fleeing the endless glares and whispered accusations. The rest of the HOA board scrambled to right the ship. They hired a third-party management company to oversee daily operations, ensuring compliance with safety regulations. Residents voted to allocate funds for a professional oversight of the pool if it ever reopened. Many openly wondered if the community should fill the pool in entirely, a permanent closure as a tribute and a cautionary reminder. Amid all this, Marcia found herself with a new sense of purpose. She spearheaded a safety-first committee, meeting weekly in the clubhouse library, focusing on everything from playground equipment checks to fire extinguisher inspections. Though she still harbored anger and sadness, channeling it into tangible action gave her a sense of direction. One crisp evening, she stood outside by Kevin's Grove. The newly planted saplings swayed gently, each branch promising a future the boy would never see. Teresa and her husband, John, had moved out of Pinecrest Meadows soon after Kevin's funeral, finding it too painful to remain. The house they left behind stood vacant, a stark symbol of the void left by his absence. Louise approached, wrapped in a light cardigan. "We got official word today," she said, voice hushed. "Charges of involuntary manslaughter against George. They've indicted him." Marcia's eyes drifted to the saplings. "I can't say I'm surprised. He didn't mean for this to happen, but someone has to answer for that negligence." Louise nodded. "And the civil suits will bankrupt him, probably. The HOA's insurance can't cover all. Our dues are going up, that's for sure. It won't bring Kevin back." Marcia let out a slow breath. "But it might prevent others from taking such safety risks in the future." They began walking back toward the clubhouse. Construction tape and scaffolding indicated ongoing renovations, new safety protocols to bring the old building up to code. A line of trucks from the professional management company was parked near the pool fence, ready to begin repairs if the community ever decided to refill it. "Do you think we should keep the pool?" Louise asked, glancing at the empty expanse. "A lot of people want to turn it into a garden or a memorial space." Marcia folded her arms. "I'm torn. Pools can be wonderful gathering places if maintained responsibly. But the memory, some folks might never set foot in that area again without reliving what happened." Louise gave a sad smile. "Time will tell, I suppose." That weekend, the Safety First Committee held a town hall in the refurbished clubhouse. Residents arrived, determined to rebuild trust. Chairs filled quickly, with folks eager to speak on a range of issues. Mental health support, updated liability rules, new volunteer committees. The new interim president, a composed retiree named Colleen, called the meeting to order. Marcia took the microphone to discuss the possibility of retaining a psychologist for a monthly support group. She believed many, especially older residents who had witnessed the tragedy, could benefit from talking it through. A few attendees exchanged uncertain glances, but overall seemed receptive. Then a frail hand rose in the second row. It was Mr. Hollis, wearing an oxygen cannula under his nose. The hush in the room was immediate. Everyone knew what he'd been through. Hollis stood, shaky but resolute. "I just want to say, I'm thankful for the prayers and kindness. My doctor says I'll never breathe quite the same, but I'm alive. And that's thanks to a neighbor who pulled me out of that water and the paramedics who got here in time. He swallowed hard, eyes misty. I hope we honor Kevin's memory by never letting something like this happen again. This community, my home, is worth protecting. Applause rippled through the crowd. Marcia nodded in agreement, her throat tight with emotion. She locked eyes with Louise, who dabbed a tear. The rest of the meeting carried a hopeful tone, focusing on accountability and compassion. Instead of the divisive, screaming matches of a month ago, people spoke calmly, united by the desire to move forward. Plans were made to create a permanent memorial at Kevin's Grove, to sponsor CPR and first aid courses for residents, and to review every safety protocol in the community. In the following weeks, a few families left, unable to bear the lingering sadness. But others stayed, determined to reclaim the sense of belonging that had initially drawn them to Pinecrest Meadows. The meal trains evolved into neighborhood gatherings, less about partying by the pool and more about forming real connections. People mowed lawns for elderly neighbors, checked smoke alarms for each other, and built an informal phone tree to handle emergencies. Marcia watched it all with mixed feelings. The sorrow would never fully vanish, but in its place grew a commitment to communal well-being she'd never witnessed before. Perhaps, in a heartbreaking twist, Kevin's passing had galvanized everyone to truly care for one another. One late afternoon, she found herself standing at the edge of Kevin's Grove again, gazing at the plaque that read, "In memory of Kevin. May our community watch over every child as its own." The gentle whisper of wind through the new leaves felt like a quiet testament to hope. As she turned to leave, she thought she could almost sense the echo of children's laughter, an echo from a time when no one realized just how fragile life could be. Yet beneath the sorrow, there was a sense that Pinecrest Meadows was evolving into something deeper than a neighborhood with an HOA. It was becoming a place defined by its response to tragedy, a place where the weight of loss was measured against a fierce, collective will to protect and support one another. And though the journey ahead might be steep, they were at least traveling it together. The end.